A warm, humid rain had started to come down while they were below deck, and dusk turned to night. As the first day of their adventure comes to an end, the Kongs climb from the deepest bowels of the flooded hold to the tallest point of the ship. New challenges await them, but new friends too. Look, it's not always easy to write intros to these videos, so just get off my dick, okay? This is part 5 of Overthinking Donkey Kong Country 2. There's quite a bit to unpack with Topsail trouble, so let's start at the start. First thing we see in the level is the crate containing Rattly, the first new animal buddy of DKC2. When you think snakes, jumping doesn't ever spring to mind, but that just happens to be Rattly's forte. He works a lot like Winky from the first game did, though I'd argue he's a bit easier to use than Winky. Someone commented on an earlier video that Rattly's shape makes judging where you're going to land a lot easier, and I think that's true. I wouldn't be surprised if he was deliberately designed that way either. The first half of the level is basically a showcase for Rattly, but it doesn't need to be anything more than that. It's a simple 2D platformer for kids, and Rattly's heaps of fun to play with. So getting to spend half a level with him, a level designed specifically around his playstyle no less, is an absolute joy. I miss Winky, but at the end of the day, both animal buddies are great, and Rattly's right up there with the best of them. I wish we got more of him in future games. Anyway, as I said earlier, the first half of the level is a showcase for Rattly. He's present from the very start. The bananas above the starting point subconsciously get the player acclimated to Rattly's rhythm, before testing their skills against enemies and obstacles. He's paired up against Kaboing here, which I feel was very much a conscious decision by the developers. Jumping animal buddy against jumping enemies forces the player to be more cautious and aware of their timing. The first bonus area is based around Rattly too, getting the player comfortable with chaining together aerial attacks on flying enemies, with Rattly's unique rhythm and physics. There's a lot of space between levels in this first half, giving the player plenty of headroom to put Rattly through his paces. And there's another A made of bananas to show the player just how high Rattly can jump. Another thing that's immediately noticeable about Topsail trouble is it starts us on the opposite side and progresses from right to left. It's not the only level to do this, but it is the first in DKC history to do it. There's also a warp barrel right at the start, but I'm only mentioning it here so that I can say I have no plans to talk about the warp barrels in future levels. Every level has one, they're usually very close to the start of the level, and they kinda suck the fun out of the game. The second half of the level is fairly generic, not too different from Mainbrace Mayhem in terms of your moment-to-moment gameplay. There's less emphasis on enemies like Klinger, and more on the new additions, Zinger, and to a much lesser extent, Flitter. There's actually a cool detail regarding those two. The level begins with neeks and click-clacks, but after the first 2 horizontal runs, it's all Kremlings. Once you lose Rattly and hit the checkpoint barrel, it's all zingers and flitters, with the occasional clinger to contend with. As we get further from the hold, the rats and bugs infesting the ship are seen less, and as we get to the highest reaches of the rigging, only flying insects and Kremlings whose specialty is climbing in the rigging can be found. It's probably nothing, but it's a cool little bit of world building if done deliberately. Another hot nugget of world building is how we start with 5 masts at the beginning of the level. Then over time, we move past them all until only 1 is remaining. That final mast, the highest point of the ship, is the one upon which the boss of Gangplank Galleon's nest is built, but we'll get more into that next episode. There's also the first ever blue balloon in the game at the end of the level. I don't know why I ended the video on this point. Apparently Topsail Trouble's background was originally dark blue clouds and is still in the game's code somewhere. I can't prove that, so maybe take it with a grain of salt. While I feel the rainy night weather effect could have been cool in Mainbrace Mayhem, so as to better parallel Ropey Rampage from DKC, it's cool here too. The progression of time from morning to afternoon in Pirate Panic and Mainbrace Mayhem, to sundown and early evening in Gangplank Galley and Lockjaw's Locker, and finally to night in Topsail Trouble, does a lot to progress the story. Gangplank Galleon tells a fairly self-contained story, and I love that about it. I feel like there's less of this sort of thing in DKC2, but to be fair, it hardly needs it, and what we do get is pretty great. Topsail Trouble is not a level that immediately springs to mind when I think DKC2, but it's a good one. Not overly difficult, but doesn't hold your hand either. Gives you space to get a feel for Rattly and his element, and reacquaints you with the climbing mechanics introduced in Mainbrace Mayhem. Its parallels to Barrel Cannon Canyon aren't as overt as the other levels are to theirs, but you could make the argument that the more airborne nature of the level, for lack of a better word, mirrors the end of Congo Jungle nicely. Or maybe I'm looking too much into it. Thanks for watching, and tune in tomorrow for episode 6 and the end of Gangplank Galleon, The Crow's Nest.